If you visit the Natural History Museum in South Kensington and you enter via Exhibition Road, you'll start off in Earth Hall, where you are greeted by a very unusual character. This is Sophie, the world's most complete Stegosaurus, with 85% of her bones intact. I should be clear, it's nicknamed Sophie, but we don't know for sure if it's a male or a female. It's hard to convey in photos just how big Sophie is. Already 6 meters long, and not a grown-up yet. The biggest ones would have been up to 9 meters. She's an American immigrant from the dinosaur-rich soil of Wyoming. Stegosaurus means roof lizard, because when paleontologists first found them, they thought the plates lay flat like a turtle shell. Stegosauruses are herbivores that lived 155 to 150 million years ago in the Western US, Portugal, and, we found out this year, Scotland. Sophie would have known other dinosaurs like Diplodocus, Brachiosaurus, Allosaurus, and Ceratosaurus. Parts of about 80 Stegosauruses have been found worldwide. And what Sophie's famous for is those big spiky bones on her back. Well, strictly speaking, they're not quite bones. They are hard enough to fossilise, but they're more like the ridges you see on crocodiles. They grow out of the skin, not out of the skeleton. Weirdly enough, we still don't know quite what they were for. The obvious answer seems to be defence, but scientists these days tend to think they're too fragile for that. And anyway, they're not much good if someone comes at you from the side. Instead, they might have had a few different uses. They might have been good for display, like a peacock's tail. They might have even been fun colours originally. Maybe other Stegosauruses just thought this looked really sexy. Some people have suggested that male and female Stegosauruses had different shaped plates, so maybe that helped them tell the difference. Also, we know the plates had blood vessels running through them, so the blood would get cooler as it went through the plates where it's closer to the skin. Maybe they're a good way of cooling down if you can't sweat, because, you're a lizard. Or maybe they're like nature's platform shoes, making you look taller than you really are. What is good for defence, though, are those brutal spikes on the tail. You can swing that around and actually aim it at whatever's attacking you. Until 1982, there was no word for this kind of spiky tail. Everyone just called them tail spikes or spike bones or whatever. Finally, it was given a name not by a paleontologist, not by a researcher, but by a cartoonist called Gary Larson. He wrote this quick, funny comic where some cavemen are giving a presentation on dinosaurs, and one points to the tail and says, "Now this end is called the Thagomizer, after the late Thag Simmons." And amazingly, the word actually caught on among real scientists and is now used in books and by museums. Despite its size, Sophie's brain was about the size of a dog's. To be fair, animals only have to be smarter than the food they eat, and in this case, Sophie ate ferns. Still, scientists were so shocked by the small size of its brain that some of them used to think it must have a second brain in the hips, where there's a big gap in the bones. This is called the brain in the butt theory. And as weird as it sounds, it was taken seriously in some quarters for a while. But birds have this gap too, and they don't have brains in their butts. It also has no front teeth. So how did Sophie bite things? Well, we think it might have had a beak, a bit like a turtle. Turtle beaks are hard, and will definitely take your fingers off if you get too close, but they don't fossilise, so we wouldn't find them. What with the Thagomizer, and the plates, and the beak, and the size, Sophie looks pretty scary. But its back legs are way longer than its front legs, meaning if it tried to run fast, its back legs would overtake its front legs and it would get all tangled up. So Stegosaurus's top speed, like as fast as Sophie could run, was probably about 3 miles an hour, about the same as your normal walking speed. And because its back legs are so long, it probably ate low-lying vegetation, like ferns and bushes and herbs, we don't know if it could rear up on its back legs to reach tree leaves or not. It also ate rocks, on purpose. They went into its stomach and helped mash up all the plants in there. Some dinosaurs were pretty solitary, but Stegosaurus lived in herds. Now, how would you possibly know that from fossils? Well, we found footprints of whole herds of them intact, which is apparently, if you know what you're looking for, what these photos show. So we think they were pretty social, living in herds rather than living on their own. Nobody knows how they mate. It is a mystery to science. The Stegosaurus was first discovered during this amazing period of history called the Bone Wars. It was an explosive rivalry between two paleontologists, Edward Drinker Cope and Othniel Charles Marsh. Each tried to outdo the other and ended up resorting to bribery, theft, smears in the press, and the destruction of specimens. It took place in Colorado, Nebraska, and Wyoming, particularly rich fossil country, between 1877 and 1892. The rivalry was so great that they both ended up broke and disgraced in the pursuit of paleontological supremacy. But they both made hugely important contributions to their fields. They first met in Berlin in 1864, and they started off as friends. They even named new species after each other. But after a while, they started to have arguments. Their work styles didn't mesh well. Cope was from a wealthy Quaker family, while Marsh grew up poor, although it just so happened that his uncle was the very wealthy banker George Peabody, so don't feel too sorry for him. One day, they went on a dig together at a mine in New Jersey, and afterwards, Marsh secretly bribed the pit operators to bring any future finds to him instead of Cope. They started attacking one another in the papers. Marsh claimed that Cope had put the head on the wrong end of Elasmosaurus. By 1873, they were at war. They were finding new species at a tremendous rate, partly because the area they were digging was very rich, and partly because not many dinosaurs had been discovered yet. Cope would name new species when actually Marsh had found them first. Marsh would claim that all Cope's new named dinosaurs were incorrect, but between them they discovered 136 new species of dinosaur, including Stegosaurus by Marsh, Triceratops, Allosaurus, and Diplodocus. I'd be happy with just one. And they massively increased public interest in dinosaurs. However, in their haste to be the first to convincingly reconstruct the skeletons they'd found, they would slap the bones together very quickly, making mistakes that would lead to confusion decades down the line. They also destroyed hundreds of fossils so the other team couldn't get them. At one point, Cope was hiring dinosaur rustlers to sneak onto Marsh's dig site and steal fossils. Marsh's men destroyed bones to keep them out of Cope's hands. At one point, the rival teams threw rocks at each other. And the rivalry didn't end until Cope died in 1891. He kept it up to his dying breath. In his will, he donated his skull to science and challenged Marsh to do the same, so he could prove that he had a bigger brain. Marsh never took him up on the offer. So as far as we know, Stegosauruses weren't native to London. At least no one's ever found one here, and we've done a lot of digging here over the years. So Sophie got here thanks to a donation from the hedge fund manager Jeremy Herman, and their specimen is nicknamed Sophie after his daughter. There were 69 other donors, but he was the main one. If you're wondering how much a Stegosaurus skeleton will set you back these days, the actual price has not been disclosed. And today, Sophie greets 5 million visitors to the Natural History Museum every year.